The Lewis County John Doe, identified as Glen Michael Rudge. This one begins in Lewis County, Washington, on March 2, 2021. It was at this time that timber workers were working in a wooded area on Roebuck Road near Winlock, Washington. Winlock is located in Lewis County, west of Interstate 5. They examined him and they found no obvious COD or any signs of trauma at all, so it would end up being considered undetermined. They believed him to be a white male around 18 to 30 and around 6 foot tall or 182 centimeters. If they determined how long they believed he'd been in the area where he was found, that part wasn't released. It would take Othram Labs to obtain DNA and use genetic genealogy, giving Glen Michael Rudge back his name. Mike, or Mikey as he often was called, was about 25 years old when he went missing in 2018. So it's likely he'd been where he was found around 3 years, but it's impossible to know for sure. It could be less. Mikey had been having a hard time. He'd been diagnosed as schizophrenic, and his last post on Facebook in 2014 was about Pokemon. He was around 21 or 22 then. His family would say that once his schizophrenia got worse, he would kind of disappear from the family. But his faith was still strong, and he was still attending church in Longview, Washington. My heart goes out to Mikey's family, and I'm sure this is nearly as hard on them as it was on Mike, but from what I was able to gather, I think Mike disappeared around the time of his last Facebook post. Age of onset for schizophrenia in males is around 21 to 25, and it's not unheard of for the person to pull away from their family, especially if their family believes the diagnosis and they don't. I'm not sure what the case was here, but this is actually the case with one of my own family members. It's just so complicated, and things can happen and fall apart for a lot of reasons. It's just why mental health should be funded and is so important. Mike's family remembers him for his love of playing soccer and how he taught his nieces and nephews to play. He cracked jokes, he loved music, going biking, and telling stories to others. They would say that his kind nature was evident to all. Glen Michael Rudge was missing for 6 years, and he went unidentified for 2. Had he lived, he would be 27 years old today. We begin today in late September of 1991 in Sacramento, California. It was here that an older woman had been found passed in a parking garage at the intersection of 3rd and L Street. Upon examination, they would place her age as likely in her 40s or 50s, with hair that was going gray and fell past her shoulders. Her COD, if determined, has never been released. She had an upper denture and only 7 lower teeth. One thing that did stand out was that she was tall for a woman. She measured around 5'11" or 180 centimeters. She was eventually recognized, and it was discovered she'd been seeing a mental health worker, but she stopped going when she discovered he was linked to the county mental health program. If I had to guess, this was most likely some kind of case manager who was doing outreach among the homeless population. And this is usually to help those who needed access services. An acquaintance of hers would come forward to say she didn't know her as Amanda, but rather her name was Carol Houston, and she often ate at a Chinese restaurant in the area. It seemed at the time like an identification should be shortly coming. However, between the 2 names our Jane Doe was using, it would turn out neither was the real one. And even her fingerprints led nowhere. They hit a brick wall, and all they could do was wait for technology and options. Thankfully, that break would finally come when the California Department of Justice gave a sample of her DNA to Othram Labs. They would discover that she was not Carol Houston or Amanda Defore, as they suspected. Her name was actually Dorothy Sandusky. Her family and friends knew her as Dot. While she gave out fake names, she had given her real birth date. She graduated from high school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but then the information on her life pretty much just dries up. All they had was a photo that was attached to her mental health worker. And the contrast of that photo and the one of her with her family and friends is pretty striking. I don't know how far apart those 2 photos were taken, but it's impossible not to feel for what must have been difficulties in her life. Clearly something changed. This woman on the Reddit thread for her Jane Doe identification would say she'd been identified as her great-aunt Dot. She explained they'd tried to find her for 30 years. Her great-aunt Dot was extremely smart, but she also had a mental illness, and one day she just disappeared. She walked away from them and didn't contact them again. And in fact, they'd been contacting the police in Philadelphia for years, trying to find her. It would turn out that Dot was 56 when she passed. A family member was putting money in a bank account for her in case she ever decided to access it, but that account was never used again. The last they had heard, she'd been living in a homeless encampment, likely in Philadelphia. They had no idea she was even in California. The most important thing is that Great Aunt Dot will be going home. Dorothy Sandusky went unidentified for 32 years. Had she lived, she would be 88 years old today. Edna, or the Hernando County Jane Doe, also known as the Brooksville Jane Doe, identified as Peggy Joyce Shelton. This one begins on July 19, 1972, in Brooksville, Florida. Like so many cases before and after, it was a young person who made the discovery while hiking through a local wooded area off State Road 50 and High Corner Road in Brooksville. It was here a young man discovered a woman underneath a blanket, which is described as a pineapple damask print with 3 square corners and 1 rounded corner. It appeared she'd been there no longer than 3 or 4 days, and the COD was the result of asphyxiation. They were able to find a witness, and it's believed she had been seen with 2 other individuals in a white 1961 or 1962 Ford Falcon. The one on the screen is just an example. The 3 were actually seen exiting the vehicle together, and while the 3 entered the woods, only 2 exited. They believe she may have traveled to the area from either Alabama or North Florida. In 2015, they would exhume her for additional testing and a reconstruction. Investigators nicknamed her Edna, just to have something to call her, and they did all that they could to try to identify her. There's something comforting about some of these jurisdictions, going a little bit extra to humanize the person who they were trying to name. So they would take Edna and do an isotope test, and it would indicate she'd been in the U.S. for 5 to 10 years, all of which had been spent in Florida. She had only 12 teeth, 6 on top and 6 on bottom, and they were in pretty poor condition, with no more leads, leaving, of course, only genetic genealogy. I've made it clear I don't really like the isotope testing. I don't think it's very accurate, and this is just another reason why. We know now that Peggy Joyce Shelton was actually from Kentucky, not Florida. I wish I could tell you more about Peggy. I always want it to be a celebration of the person, but in a way, this just means she deserves so much more for someone to come forward and give information that they know. This is one of those where it just seems justice is needed. Peggy was only 29 when this happened. Please call the number for Crime Stoppers shown on the screen if you have any information at all. Peggy Joyce Shelton went unidentified for 51 years. Had she lived, she would be 80 years old today.
Huge thanks for watching all the way to the end, and a big thanks to all of you who consistently like and comment on the videos. Whether you leave a full comment or an emoji, it makes a huge difference. The whole dance with YouTube is hard sometimes. I gain only about 350 subs a month. So if you consistently watch my videos, maybe take a moment to subscribe. It's a huge push toward the videos being suggested to new people. The next goal is 20,000. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.